So welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you all here in this webinar. We are going to start, and I'm going to invite our colleague Leeza from Caritas India to start this meeting with a prayer. The floor is yours, Leeza.
Thank you, Ari. A very good morning to the esteemed speakers who are present here and to all the participants. We'll begin our today's webinar with a short prayer. Dear God, on this World Humanitarian Day, we pay tribute to the men and women who risk their lives in service to others and raises awareness and support to those affected by crisis around the world. We read in the Holy Bible, taken from the Gospel of St. John, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for a friend. Gracious Lord, today we have gathered on this online platform to observe World Humanitarian Day. The theme for the day, humanitarian support to combat the impact of climate change, invites us to discuss on the factor that climate change has no borders, which is a larger than life reality today due to the pandemic, which has left no country untouched across the globe. We thank you for all who serve others in the neediest and most dangerous parts of this planet. Today, in a special way, we pray for the aid workers, frontline workers, and others who quietly, tirelessly, and selflessly give their time and energy, often at great cost to themselves and sometimes even unto death. We also pray for the world leaders and policy makers to take meaningful climate action for the world's most vulnerable people and to protect our planet. We also pray to bless and inspire all the speakers of today and all the participants of this webinar so that collectively we may take action to create a difference. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Leeza, for invoking God's blessings in this very important webinar on humanitarian support to combat the impact of climate change. Now, I request Dr. Benedict Rosario, we call him Dr. Allo, he is the president of Caritas Asia. To introduce him, he is the president of Caritas Asia. He was the executive secretary of Caritas Bangladesh for many years. He has been with Caritas Bangladesh for many years as the DRR director, the director for disaster risk reduction for Bangladesh. And he is a very good resource person and a very good facilitator. Now he is the president of Caritas Asia, and I would like to call Dr. Allo for the welcome address. Over to you, Dr. Allo.
Thank you, Dr. Haridas. Honorable speakers, respected participants, dear colleagues. It is my great privilege to welcome you all to this webinar on the occasion of the World Humanitarian Day. I thank very specially Caritas India for this good initiative and collaboration on the World Humanitarian Day to making the webinar as a regional event. Thank also to all the participants from Caritas India, Caritas Asia Member Organization, and from our global partners. This year, the World Humanitarian Day highlights the immediate human cost of the climate crisis by pressuring world leaders to take meaningful action for the world's most vulnerable people. In the midst of the ongoing pandemic, humanitarian relief, Caritas Member Organizations in Asia are sustaining this effort to address the urgency of climate crisis and its impact to the most vulnerable people, the indigenous people, people living in the coastal areas, and also in the periphery. Through this webinar, we hope our voice from the region will contribute to the bigger efforts being made by Caritas Confederation in the international platform, particularly the upcoming COP26 scheduled to take place in the UK in November this year. The more humanity suffers, the more we need love, mercy, and sharing. The recent UN report on climate crisis once again informs us that we are responsible for a terrible crisis, the burning and flooding of the planet. We have been observing last several weeks all over the world, the nature of flooding and nature of burning and suffering of people. I appeal to everyone to prioritize and address environmental concerns that affect the lives of the most vulnerable. Let us work with the most vulnerable. Let us step up our efforts to strengthen and renew our action plan to save our common home, as our Holy Father has inspired us. I hope every success of this webinar, and this webinar will encourage us to do more and more to overcome, to adapt, to mitigate the crisis, climate crisis we have been facing, our vulnerable people have been facing. May God bless us all. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, Dr. Allo.
Dr. Haridas, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Allo, for your welcome address, and you have highlighted the recent climate report by IPCC, which is really shocking, as you have mentioned. When one area is affected with the flooding, the other area now affected with fire. Forest fire is happening in many parts of California. And on the other side, flooding is happening, which is the reflection of climate change. Thank you for your welcome address. Now, the setting context of this webinar by Father Dr. Paul Munyeli, who is the Dynamic Executive Director of Caritas India. He has been awarded doctorate last week, and we are so proud of him. And he has done his doctorate on community mobilization and health aspects from a leading university in India, Don Bosco University in India. And he has been in this sector for more than 25 years. He was the diocesan director, and he was the director of a major hospital, so he knows what health means. And he is now the executive director of Caritas India. Father Dr. Paul Munyeli, the floor is yours for setting the context of this webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Harry. Good morning to everyone. I'm audible. Am I
You're
audible?
audible, Father. Yeah.
Hello, Dr. Harry. Am I audible?
Yes, Father, you're audible. You're audible, Father. You can
Thank
speak.
you so much.
Yeah.
Greetings to everyone from the garden city of India, Bangalore. I'm in Bangalore at the moment. Friends, it's indeed a happy occasion for all of us, the humanitarian response agents, to come together on this wonderful day, the World Humanitarian Day, a day that is connecting all of us spiritually, morally, and also with a call for renewed commitment. We are here together as a faith response. Caritas, the mission that is given to all of us as part of the call from our Lord Jesus Master. It is our collective responsibility to come together and reflect together in a world that is mostly stricken with disasters and conflicts. Friends, it is my humble invitation to all of you to spend a moment of silence, praying for the people who are afflicted, pained by what is happening in Afghanistan, a country in our own region. We have been receiving visuals which are totally disturbing, and this is something very concerning for us on this World Humanitarian Day. I have been getting calls from several Caritas partners from different parts of the globe asking what we can do to the people of Afghanistan who are fleeing away from this country and whether they can be accommodated. But we know that we want to do certain things, but sometimes we are also hands tied. But we will commit ourselves to do the best we can. And I also request to pray silently for the people. Hundreds of people died in Haiti just recently. We are also morally responsible to be in solidarity with all these brothers and sisters of ours. We have a Pandora box of problems and issues with us when we reflect on this World Humanitarian Day. As humanitarian agents, we respond to all these humanitarian concerns locally, nationally, regionally, and globally. When we look at the disasters, we see two major types of disasters. One is climate-induced, and the other one is human-induced in the form of violences and conflicts. When we look at the human-induced violences and conflicts, India has to present so many such cases, and one such very important case is the case of Kandhamal, in Orissa. And what is the result? These human-induced disasters result in the migration of the population, searching for peace, searching for a decent and dignified life, but that ends up in losing their identity and resulting in many problems like trafficking and other issues. When we look at the climate-induced disasters, again, the result is not very different. We see the surge in the cases of climate-induced refugees climate refugees, we call them. Friends, from Indian context, we have again so many such stories. Two such stories I would like to just casually mention here. One is the problems in Sundarbans. Sundarbans is a beautiful landscape in West Bengal, bordering Bangladesh. And because of the climatic events and the floods, people not able to make a living, and the Sundarbans getting submerged every year, they make a kind of a refuge and migration journey to all the way to Kerala, from one border to the southernmost border of our country, the state of Kerala. And we know, you know that in the state of Kerala, we have 39 lakh migrant population, a very small state with just 30 million population, of which 39 lakh are migrants, mostly induced by the climatic conditions. It could be either floods or droughts in other parts of the north and northeastern part of the country of India. And this is a reality. Friends, and when such issues and shocks happen, and that was a reality in the context of COVID pandemic first episode, 40 million migrants exodus, return journey happened in the state of, in our country. And the migrants again coming back from the state of Kerala to their own home places. I think we need answers and solutions today. Mostly we come with the short-term solutions. We provide them food, we provide them relief, and maybe going beyond, we may provide them shelter, and to a certain extent restoring their livelihoods. But that doesn't solve the problem today. We need long-term sustainable solutions, taking into account the core humanitarian standards, the sphere standards, and also with a very focused SDG principles applied, leaving no one behind. Friends, as we know, the 5 important dimensions of the SDG, people, planet, peace, prosperity, and partnership, are some of the very important dimensions that we need to really reflect very strongly and collectively today as we observe this World Humanitarian Day, if at all we look for sustainable solutions. And to my assumptions and understanding, looking from the perspective of country perspective of India, and that shouldn't be very different in other parts of in other countries as well, that today people need to be accessible to land and water. When we reflect on this theme today, humanitarian support to combat the impact of climate change, one of the important solutions that can be really brought into to bring the changes that we are looking for is to have access to land and water. And when we think of this issue, we see the kind of landlessness problems, the grabbing of the land because of the neoliberal policies, the multinational companies and corporates grabbing the land of the ordinary poor people, leaving them to abject poverty today and making them even more vulnerable to all these disasters. How do we work for policies with the government at different countries to give rights and entitlements to land so that they have a peaceful settlement and they work for their food production, for their sustainability, and for their security? And these are some of the very important thoughts in line with access to water. We know the issues of the water that is being a kind of problem all over the parts of the globe. And certainly we need to think in terms of looking, creating measures to access to water, providing a lot of water conservation and techniques. Friends, I conclude here. This observation day is jointly organized by Caritas India and Caritas Asia. I would like to appreciate Hari of Caritas India and Hari of Caritas Asia for coming together to organize this event in partnership with all our partners across the globe. I'm very happy to see that there are more than 100 participants from our country Caritases. And we have a wonderful panelists here to enlighten us, to motivate us, to enthuse us rather. We have Dr. Anode, we have Aloysius John giving us a message, Secretary General of Caritas International. We have Dr. Professor Vinod Menon, a stalwart, a man who really inspires us when it comes to disasters and climate change. He is the founding member of National Disaster Management Authority in our country, India. And we will listen to him. And we have Claire from Caritas Malaysia, and also Father Antonio from Caritas Philippines. Friends, let us listen to them. Let us come with the new sustainable solutions, as Pope Francis would rather exhort each and every one of us, the Caritas fraternity, that we need to come with courageous innovation. And that's a beautiful phrase Pope Francis uses. In the contemporary times today, when we are faced with all back-to-back disasters and emergencies impacting on the climate events, we need to be courageously innovating today. So maybe this could be the message that brings all the best for the rest of the hours that we will be listening to each and every one of us. God bless you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Father Dr. Paul, for setting the context of this webinar. And you have really enlightened us on the people, planet, peace, and prosperity principle and the need of focusing it. And you have mentioned about the need of land entitlement for the poor and marginalized, and the need of promoting water conservation and soil conservation to ensure better water quality and quantity. And your last word, like courageous innovation of Pope Francis, is another beautiful message that you have highlighted while setting the context of this webinar. So thank you very much, Father Paul, for that. Now, I'm really sorry that we are able to accommodate only 100 people in this. Many people are waiting and they are sending messages and many are calling. So because there is a limit only because it is a Zoom platform. So Ari is trying his level best to add more, but I don't know whether it is succeeded. Still, it is only 100 people. So we will. So Hari is trying his level best to add more into the Zoom platform. So we are really sorry for the inconveniences caused to those who are not able to join this meeting, because more than 150 people are supposed to be here. Many people are waiting to join. So Hari, next part of it, you please the video of Dr. Aloysius John. Ari, can you please do that?
Dear friends of Caritas Asia, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me to speak at this important occasion of the World Humanitarian Day webinar, which is a moment to highlight the great work done by the humanitarian communities all over the world, especially in Asia, and also to reflect on different humanitarian challenges and concerns and make some relevant suggestions for the future. Our world is facing a number of crises, both natural and man-made. The natural disasters that adversely affect the most impoverished nations. The recent earthquake in Haiti, amidst the raging political and economic chaos in the country, droughts, environmental recording one of the world's worst season in decades globally. They are all created by the lack of care for the environment, leading to climate change and ecological crisis. All these are happening in a context where the COVID-19 pandemic is creating havoc and panic at a global level. They all represent a major humanitarian challenge for the humanitarian workers. On the other hand, the major man-made crises also bring about untold sufferings to the peoples. The economic crisis amidst a political chaos in Lebanon has left the Lebanese in the incapacity to even procure bread. The recent developments in Afghanistan, where an additional more than 500,000 are on the road to exile, the chaos and the incertitude that exist in many of these countries in the region. Today, our globalized world is facing compound humanitarian crisis wherein people are facing multiple problems at the same time. It is in these challenging situations and contexts that humanitarian workers, in particular Caritas collaborators, work at the grassroots to bring a ray of hope and joy to those who are affected by these crises, to accompany, defend, and protect them. The World Humanitarian Day is also the moment to ask ourselves what we should do, what we should propose, and how to encourage and motivate decision makers to take bold steps that would go in the way of ensuring dignity to those affected by these crises. Caritas Internationalis, a confederation of 162 members, is working with the grassroots communities in 200 countries and territories and is a witness to the untold sufferings caused by these man made and natural crises. In line with the teaching of Pope Francis, on this World Humanitarian Day, Caritas recalls that the only appropriate response is integral ecology, putting the interest and dignity of the human person at the center of all activities and decisions. Without determined political will on the part of the decision makers and political leaders, there will be no change, and the well being of the poorest cannot be ensured. COP26 must address this as an urgent priority, put forward tangible and adequate solutions, and allocate sufficient resources or means to realize them. On this important day, Caritas Internationalis recalls that without determined political will, human life is in danger. And where one part of humanity suffers, the whole human family suffers as well. The Confederation calls on the political leaders and decision makers to ensure a certain number of activities. First of all, ensure the safety of the Afghan population and the provision of basic needs for the Lebanese people. Allocate sufficient funds for communities to engage in community based development activities, both agricultural and non agricultural, to ensure their means of livelihood and food security. Give priority to disaster management to local communities, especially through risk reduction, formation, and activities to ensure the safety of the people through early warning systems. Encourage local governments to enter into close collaboration with local civil society organizations and faith based organizations to strengthen their response mechanism with a particular emphasis on humanitarian action to address the consequences of climate change. Ensure access to basic integral health care for the most vulnerable, including vaccines against deadly diseases. Commit to immediate economic and industrial global policies in order to minimize the impact on global warming and degradation of the ecosystem. I thank you very much for your attention and I wish you great World Humanitarian Day seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Aloysius John. Dr. Aloysius John is the Secretary General of Caritas Internationalis. He had been with the Secus Catholic for many years, and he had joined Caritas Internationalis for a few years back, and now he is the General Secretary of Caritas Internationalis. Thank you for the keynote address. Now we have Miss Claire Westwood, who is a very good trainer for climate resilience. She is the Regional Director of the Episcopal Commission for Creation Justice of Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei. And she used to be the resource person for Caritas in Asia's climate resilient approaches. And I would like to welcome Claire for your speech on climate emergencies. Over to you, Ms. Claire Westwood, for your session.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, brothers and sisters, and thank you to Caritas India, especially Dr. Haridas, for inviting me to speak to you today about the global climate emergency. I will share screen and I will also switch on my video to save bandwidth. So I will begin with the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which the UN Secretary General describes as a code red for humanity. The report states that climate change is widespread, rapid, and intensifying, and that humanity has heated the climate to at least a 100,000-year high. If you look at this graph on the left, you will see that warming and cooling has occurred on the Earth, but very slowly over hundreds of thousands of years. But from 1850 to 2020, you'll find that there is a very steep hike up. And the graph in red here shows that it is human caused. These are the 10 hottest years on record, with 2020 almost matching 2016 as the two hottest years at about 1.2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial era. And if you want to just look at warming between just 2 years, 2018 and 2020, you can see there's an increase in the area under dark pink and red, which indicate temperatures much warmer than average and recorded as the warmest. Now, an analysis of more than 170 studies examining the role of human-induced climate change in 170 extreme weather events found that 2/3 of these events were made more likely or more severe by human-induced climate change. Of these heat extremes, including heat waves and wildfires, made up 43%, droughts 18%, extreme rains or floods 17%. This answers the question that many people always ask: are disasters caused by climate change? Well, 2/3 of them at least are. A good example is Siberia. Siberia experienced a very bad heat wave in 2020, causing wide-scale impacts like wildfires, loss of permafrost, and invasion of pests. Climate scientists say climate change made this heat wave 600 times more likely. And India itself experienced soaring temperatures above 40 degrees this year, and also a very bad cyclone earlier this year. And we all know about the shocking, unprecedented floods in Germany, in China, in Mumbai. And sea level rise is a very real thing. This is Kiribati in 2008 and 2014. Sea level rise will continue for hundreds of years, even if we stopped all greenhouse gas emissions tomorrow. So the trends described in the 2021 IPCC report are these. Concentrations of carbon dioxide are unmatched for at least 2 million or more years. If you look at this small graph, you will see that we hit 420 parts per million in June 2021. Now, the safety level for healthy life on Earth is 350 parts per million. We crossed that in 1988, and we crossed 400 parts per million permanently in 2016. Glacial retreat is unmatched for the last 2,000 years. The last decade has been warmer than any period for at least 125,000 years. Sea level is rising faster than at any prior century for 3,000 years. Summer Arctic ice coverage is smaller than any time in the last 1,000 years. Ocean warming is faster than at any time since the end of the last ice age, and ocean acidification is at its highest level in the last 26,000 years. So increasing CO2 levels lead to rising temperatures, lead to more extreme weather, lead to rising sea levels, and this will have terrible impacts on human health and existing inequities. For instance, environmental degradation. If farmers cannot farm on their land anymore due to salination, due to drought, due to floods, this will lead to forced migration, civil conflict, mental health impacts, and loss of livelihoods. Extreme heat events will lead to heat-related illness and death, cardiovascular failure. Severe weather events will lead to, of course, injuries, fatalities, loss of homes, mental health impacts. And water and food insecurity will be among the worst impacts of climate change, leading to starvation, leading to worsening malnutrition and diarrheal disease. And there will be an exacerbation, of course, of existing social and health inequities and vulnerabilities, because it's the poor who are suffering the worst impacts of climate change. There will be an increase, we're already seeing, increases in vector-borne disease and dengue. And of course, air pollution. Air pollutants largely come from the same things that cause climate change, that is the burning of fossil fuel. And this will lead to increases in diseases like asthma, cardiovascular disease, respiratory allergies. And there will be an increase in the spread of waterborne diseases like cholera. This is just to show you about heat wave exposure in terms of person days. India is in green here, all right? In the last decade, you can see the sharp increase in heat wave exposure per person. This is from the 2020 report of the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change. And from 1990 to 2016, the Lancet also reported that 5 billion people were affected by almost 3,000 climate disasters. And from 1999 to 2018, the Global Climate Risk Index cites that about 500,000 people died as a result of more than 12,000 extreme weather events. Now, these have not taken into account new studies, example, the one by Monash earlier this year, that more than 5 million extra deaths a year can be attributed just to abnormal hot and cold temperatures. More than half of these occurred in Asia, particularly in East and South Asia. Right? So this is really shooting our statistics, our early statistics out of the park. 5 million just temperature-related deaths, not counting deaths related to other disasters. And against this backdrop, we find growing hunger. Hunger has been on the increase since 2014. We have about 1 billion people who are severely food insecure, and half the world can't afford a healthy diet. And if you don't have proper food for proper nutrition, your immune system is compromised, and you're more susceptible to external stresses. And the same causes of climate change, that is fossil fuel combustion, also leads to air pollution and kills about 8.7 million people. This was a study released this year from Harvard University with others. And you know, air pollution affects people throughout their lifetime, from the womb to childhood, to adulthood, to old age, through diseases like asthma, lung cancer, and diabetes. So let's look at goals for us, and we go back to the Paris Agreement, which came into force in 2016. The aim is to hold global average temperature increase to well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, while pursuing efforts to limit it to below 1.5. The IPCC came out with a report in 2018 about global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, and to tell us what will happen to the world at 1.5 degrees and at 2 degrees. And I'm just sharing with you just a few of their findings. You will see, we will see doubling of losses in terms of plant species and vertebrate species between 1.5 and 2, almost complete loss of our coral reefs, which are the breeding ground for fish, and a decline in annual catch of marine fisheries. This will double to about 3 million tons by 2 degrees. Now, this is food and livelihood for the poor who depend on natural resources to live. The same report also told us that 14% of the global population will be exposed to severe heat waves at 1.5 degrees, and this will increase to 37% at 2 degrees. Population exposed to droughts will be 350 million at 1.5 degrees, 410 million at 2 degrees. They also cited figures for floods, but I will show you now a subsequent study that has shown these figures to be underestimated. This report came out in 2019 and showed that earlier sea level rise predictions were 3 to 4 times underestimated. For instance, instead of 79 million at 2 degrees, we'll see about 300 million people annually flooded by 2050. And this will increase to 360 million by 2100. Of these, about 3/4 will come from 6 countries: China, Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand. In a high emission scenario, up to 640 million people will be annually flooded. And this map, look at the areas in pink and red. These areas are predicted to be under sea level by 2050. This is Mumbai, Kerala, and Kolkata. So Caritas, you have your work cut out for you. A report that came out in June warns that there's a different type of pandemic that's going to hit the world, and that's drought. If you look at this map, you will find that almost all the world will be exposed to drought, but look at India in particular, it is at very high risk. And the Ecological Threat Register of 2020 predicts that up to 1.2 billion people will be displaced by the climate crisis by 2050. Again, the map here shows the countries facing the most ecological threats. The darker the color, the more threats. And so India is among the high impacted countries. Coming back to our IPCC report of August this year, will climate change cause unprecedented extremes? Definitely, by way of larger magnitude, increased frequency, new locations, different timing, and a combination of all of these. Look at the world at 1.5 degrees and 3 degrees. This is warming. You will see that almost all of areas of the globe will be impacted. This is not a world we want our children to grow up in. This is precipitation and dryness. Where you see the turquoise color will be increased precipitation, that is rain and monsoons and so on. And where it's brown, there will be increased dryness. What does this mean for India? The country is expected to see an increase in frequency and severity of hot extremes, namely through heat waves, terrible heat waves, incidents of forest fire as well, increase in rainfall, southern parts and also the southwestern parts of India, monsoon precipitation, glacial lake outbursts, floods, landslides, and glacier volumes will decline. Initially, there will be too much water, and then there will be no water as the glaciers, the Himalayan glaciers melt. This is in map form, 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, 4 degrees. Let's just look at 2 degrees. You will find here how much more warm the area will be. And here you'll see December, January, February precipitation drier in these months for India, and then increased rain from June, July, August. And this is the number of days over 35 degrees. That's really, after which the human body will really struggle to lose heat, right? And India will be affected 90 to 180 days a year, temperatures exceeding 35 degrees. So the IPCC report says the best case scenario, that means if we reduce greenhouse gas emissions drastically within these 5 to 7 years, we can limit global warming to below 1.5 by 2100. Worst case scenario, we can go up to 4.4 degrees Celsius. This is a range of 3.3 to 5.7, and this is the mid-range really. A 4-degree world is not a world we want to live in. The early IPCC report did sort of recommend a formula that if we want to keep below 1.5, we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 45% below 2010 levels by 2030 and hit zero by 2050. If we don't do this, then we will reach 1.5 very soon and we will cross it. So we take very ambitious action now, especially the developed countries. We will still hit 1.5, maybe by about before 2040, but we will avoid 2, 3, and 4 degrees. However, if we continue with business as usual, we will hit 1.5 very soon, maybe by 2030, 2 degrees by about 2040, 3 degrees maybe by about 2060, and 4 degrees by about 2080 to 2090. So who is at risk of climate change? Basically everyone, everywhere, especially those living in poverty, women, children, and the elderly, outdoor workers, people living with chronic medical conditions, those living in small island states, developed coastal, mountainous, polar regions, there isn't much place left on Earth to live, and countries with weak health systems that will not be able to respond, as we can see already now from COVID. We think especially about the poor, the children, rural women, and those who depend on agriculture and natural resources to survive. So the way forward is essentially justice and resilience. And the justice that we need to talk about is ecological justice, which is the only thing that will capture all the different aspects of justice. Justice for Mother Earth, climate justice, the rich countries have to do more. They have to step up their game, or we won't be able to make it. Intra and intergenerational justice, gender justice, social, economic, political, food, energy, and technology justice. In terms of resilience, we need to rebuild or allow the Earth time to rebuild her resilience, but we also need to build community resilience. So for rural communities, of course, it's made up of 5 factors. That's ecosystem capital, farm technological capital, social capital, land and settlement design, and adaptive capacity. This includes disaster risk reduction, which Caritas works a lot on, but it also includes giving people the capacity to assess their own level of resilience, to take adaptation measures, to be able to revert or come up with new forms of livelihood, new forms of food security, and so on. In 2019, Pope Francis declared a global climate emergency, warning that a failure to act urgently to reduce greenhouse gases would be a brutal act of injustice towards the poor and future generations. And earlier this year, the Vatican came up with the Laudato Si Action Platform. It is based on 7 goals: response to the cry of the earth, response to the cry of the poor, ecological economics, adoption of sustainable lifestyles, ecological education, ecological spirituality, and community engagement and participatory action. This is to operationalize and put into action Laudato Si, which came out in 2015. And, 7 sectors that are going to roll this out over the next 7 years: families, institutes, economy. This is made up mainly of cooperatives, businesses, and farms, religious orders, parishes and dioceses, hospitals and healthcare centers, and organizations and groups. And it is hoped that Caritas will join this and lend your wisdom to organizations and groups. Thank you very much, my brothers and sisters, and God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire, for your very good talk on the issue of global climate temperature rise, which is a big concern. Also, you have highlighted the issue with pollution and the need of promoting climate-friendly measures so that the problem can be reduced, and the need of promoting Laudato Si measures. Now, just 1 minute. Now, the next speaker of the day is Professor Vinod Chandra Menon, who will talk to us about the emerging new humanitarianism in COVID times. And Professor Vinod Menon is a very good friend of Caritas India, and he is the founder member of National Disaster Management Authority of Government of India, which is of the status of Union Minister of State in the Government of India. And he has been a consultant to UNDP, UN ESCAP, World Bank, and many UN organizations. And he is a specialist in disaster risk reduction, as he was the member of National Disaster Management Authority. And he is the authority to talk about emerging new humanitarianism in COVID times. The floor is yours, Professor Vinod Chandra Menon.
Thank you, Dr. Haridas. I want to thank, first of all, Caritas Asia, Caritas India, and IDAL for organizing this webinar, which is extremely relevant. And what Claire Westwood actually just shared in the presentation is actually the theme of this year's World Humanitarian Day celebrations. The observation, which highlighted some of the challenges which the human race, that's a theme. The theme is as the human race, which is before us. And all of you know that 19th August is actually observed as a World Humanitarian Day in memory of devastating bombing happened in Baghdad in 2003. When United Nations Secretary General's Special Representative Sergio de Mello.
Shiva, can you put off your mic? Shiva, yes. Hello.
Yes.
There is some disturbance because of the sound from your.
Yes. The UN Secretary General's Special Representative in Iraq, Sergio Vera de Mello, along with 21 UN staff members, lost their lives in 2003. Then in 2007, we saw again, the kind of the attack which happened in Algiers on the UN offices. In 2009, in Kabul, in Afghanistan, we saw the attack on the UN offices. So in 2003, 2007, and 2009, the UN offices, faced the attack and the bombing. Now, we also have seen that the humanitarian practitioners have actually faced a lot of challenges in many parts of the world in the recent times, and they have also faced a lot of difficulties due to natural disasters. And also during COVID, we have seen that many of the people who are actually humanitarian assistance practitioners, both in the multilateral and bilateral organizations, international NGOs, national NGOs, we've had a lot of unfortunate loss of lives. Now, I think all of these is very relevant to look at what is actually the challenge before humanitarians in terms of humanitarian programming during difficult times. And Claire Westwood has actually outlined some of the challenges with specific reference to climate change, extreme events, drought, which is happening, heat waves, which are happening, and so on. And we saw that in the past few weeks, we have seen wildfires happening in Turkey, in Greece, in Siberia, and also in France. We've seen floods happening in Henan in China. We have seen that happening in England, in Austria, in France, in Germany, and in India. We have seen landslides happening in many parts, including Japan, in India, and many other countries. And we have Father Tony from Philippines, and Philippines is a country which has been repeatedly facing the onslaught of typhoons. And we've seen when Haiyan happened in the devastation which happened in Tacloban and also in many other parts, the people who have been facing difficulties. And now with COVID-19, we are seeing this happening in 220 countries, people who have lost livelihoods, who have suffered a lot of setbacks. Now, in the case of the human race, I would like to just mention that in 1988, Claire mentioned about what happened in 1988. 1988, the Time magazine declared the person of the year as the planet Earth. And I think if you can lay your hands on a copy of the Time magazine 1988, when the planet Earth was declared as the person of the year, it is a collector's item. If you can go through the details of what is actually there. And, we know that environmental action actually and climate change became important in the recent years because of the Paris Agreement in 2015 and the reaction which the Paris Agreement also faced from the United States. And now we see that climate change has become a reality because we are seeing this happening in different parts of the world, and we are seeing the heat waves in Europe. We are seeing also drought happening in many parts and malnutrition, the loss of food security, the loss of the spread of epidemics, and also waterborne diseases, as what was mentioned by Claire. It's not only dengue and chikungunya and malaria. There are many other diseases which are actually also happening. There are neglected tropical diseases. And for people in Asia, it's very important that we recognize some of the points which have been mentioned also in the 6th assessment report of the IPCC, which has been described by Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, as the code red for humanity. And I think all of us need to recognize that we are having a bleak future ahead of us, and sustainable development, which was defined in Our Common Future by people like Gro Harlem Brundtland, who was the chairperson of the WCED, the World Commission on Environment and Development, which defines sustainable development as the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And I think, in no time in human history has this definition become so relevant as of today. We have to really make sure that the water level, which is actually depleting, the groundwater, which is depleting, the loss of, ecology. And UNEP has declared 2021 to 2031 as the UN decade for ecosystem restoration. And I think all the countries which are actually facing fragile ecosystems need to take some of these messages very, very, very carefully. And we need to invest in the present so that, our future will become, bright, and our next generations will not have to go through the kind of devastations happening because of the loss of groundwater and the damage which is actually happening because of the glacier melt and in the Himalayas, and also in many other parts of the world, we are seeing the ecological impact of climate change. That in the Haiti earthquake in 2010, the reports of more than 300,000 people losing their lives was mentioned. And we also saw that 102 people from the UN staff, in Haiti lost their lives. And this is the largest single loss happening to humanitarian practitioners because of a natural disaster anytime in the history of the UN. And the new humanitarianism, which I want to talk about, actually was something which we have seen in the recent years, and most importantly during the COVID period of 2020 and 2021. Several waves were happening in many parts of the world, where 220 countries went through the COVID-19. And what is the new humanitarianism? New humanitarianism is not only just humanitarian assistance practitioners and humanitarian aid workers, people working in multilateral and bilateral organizations and international NGOs and national NGOs. It's also the common citizens. And I hope, some of you may recall that the person of the year in 2006 for the Time magazine was you, Y-O-U, which puts the point on each person on the planet Earth becomes responsible for the kind of solutions. We have to be part of the solutions, otherwise, we are all part of the problem. And I think the time has come for all of us to really look at this very seriously, because the frequency of disasters is increasing, the intensity is increasing, the impact is increasing. We are trying to reduce the loss of lives, but we are seeing the increase in the economic damage which is being caused by disasters, extreme events, and climate change induced hydrometeorological disasters. So I think the new humanitarianism calls for everybody to participate in this whole process of resilience building of communities around us. We need to work with the senior citizens, we need to work with housewives, we need to work with students, youth, and we need to work with all sections of the society. And we saw that when the migrant workers were actually forced to travel in India to their villages, when the countrywide lockdown was announced in March 2020, we saw that many people came forward, the students, the youth, alumni of universities, they all came forward to support the migrant workers. And I think that new humanitarianism is actually what we are seeing. We are seeing people reaching out to help communities, people reaching out to help, the relatives of patients admitted in hospitals who needed oxygen cylinders or oxygen concentrators. And we saw many countries, many international organizations, civil society organizations, faith-based organizations coming forward and then, participating in that emergency response. And that is the new humanitarianism. And I hope that, we will actually see more of this involvement in trying to ensure that community resilience is actually supported and strengthened. And today we are seeing that in this presence of large numbers of people from different Caritas families across Asia Pacific and also across Europe. We have seen that there are people from Mongolia, from Cambodia, from Germany, and from Philippines and Bangladesh and many other countries. So thank you very much, Caritas Asia and Caritas India, for giving me this opportunity to share some thoughts. And several years ago, when I also participated in one of the Caritas India events, I saw the international program, which is organized by Caritas India, brought in people from several countries around the world through Caritas International. And Dr. Aloysius Paul and the team in Caritas International, I want to thank you for considering the outreach across the world. And I mentioned on that day when I was speaking, I said that Caritas International is almost like, another UN, because you have used faith as a unifier across several countries in the world. Thank you very much, Caritas Asia and Caritas India, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Vinod Chandra Menon, for your very strong message highlighting the humanitarian response in the situation, in the emergency situation and all that. And you have mentioned that we have to be part of the solutions in the context of lots of problems in front of us. And you, me, and all should be part of the solutions, not part of the problems. And thank you for appreciating the effort of Caritas International, Caritas Asia, and Caritas Member Organizations. Thank you very much, Professor Vinod Chandra Menon, for accepting our invitation and giving a very strong message on the emerging new humanitarianism in COVID times. Thank you very much. Next speaker for this program is Father Tony. Father Tony is the Executive Secretary of Catholic Bishops Conference of Philippines as well as he's the Executive Secretary of Caritas Philippines. And Father Tony will be talking about future of climate emergency and the power of localization from the experiences from Philippines. Over to you, Father Tony.
Thank you, Ari. Good day to everyone. It is my privilege and opportunity to share our initiatives in the Philippines, especially on this occasion of the World Humanitarian Day. So, our commission is one of the Episcopal Commission on Social Action, Justice and Peace of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines. And we call it also Caritas Filipinas Foundation. The Social Action Commission was established in 1966 as a humanitarian development and advocacy arm of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines. And we have the vision, empowered and resilient Filipino communities. And also we have the mission. And the Philippines is always visited by a lot of typhoons, no? Every year, averaging 20 typhoons every year. And maybe most of you have remember the big one, we call it the Haiyan in 2014, and locally we call it Yolanda, devastated the Visayas region. And since then, every year until now, we are visited by increasing number and increasing intensity of typhoons. That's why in 2016, our commission came up with a roadmap for sustainability and resiliency. And well, we know already what we mean by resiliency. It's the capacity, for our people to face the hazards, of the climate change. And of course, we want to sustain our initiatives in responding to this challenge of climate change. And it's a roadmap because we want it to be our guide, to be our path, to be a process where we can continue to develop and strengthen our capacity to respond. This year, we made an initiative. This is for the first time in the Philippines that the 8 Episcopal Commissions of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines came together last October of 2020 with the Laudato Si movement serving as a secretariat to come up with a national Laudato Si program. The program has the objective of putting together all our initiatives of 85 dioceses. And these 85 dioceses have 85 social action centers or Caritas centers. And we have 6 components of this national program of Laudato Si. And we have the education and formation. And then we have this liturgy and worship. We have already started last year that every year from September 1 to the 2nd Sunday of October, which is the celebration of the Indigenous Peoples Sunday in the Philippines, we call it the season of creation. So that is part already of our ordo, or liturgical celebration every year. We have also a component on research and database. There are a lot of groups doing studies on climate change and on strategies, and we want to come up with the data, to centralize the data so that it could be a good use for everybody. And of course, we are now developing the organization. We are setting up ecological ministry in 85 dioceses, and hopefully organize that ministry in the parish level and even to our small Christian communities all over the country. And to tell you, to share with you, we have already a regular course ongoing now in our Caritas Academy based in Tagaytay City, where we have participants from 85 dioceses learning how to understand deeply the climate emergency and how to respond by putting up a ministry, and and the strategy how to put it up in their locality. And we have also the component of strengthening partners. We have a lot of partners from different faith-based groups, civil society organizations, and even government agencies. No, we want to put together all our initiatives to have an impact on our response to the climate change. And of course, we have the component on specific advocacies. In the Philippines, not our problem on climate that contribute to climate emergency is not just typhoons coming in. Our government lifted up the moratorium on mining. So that's really our problem now. We are organizing fora, we are campaigns against coal mining, which contributes a lot to the worsening global or climate change in the Philippines. So we have these advocacies, and we have also a program on divestment. Now we encourage the banks not to invest the funds to destructive or extractive industries. Hopefully, they will invest the funds to renewable energy. So we have these 6 components of the national program that will guide us now in our initiative. Now, this is an example of launching a program in the country. No, the whole CBCP, we call it Catholic Bishops Conference of the Philippines, led by our commission. We campaign for Laudato Si goals for common good, and hopefully our national program can realize the 7-year goals by mobilizing 7 sectors. So we launched this, this program. And then we have also organized eco-convergence of church and civil societies organization. We have 3 hubs, one in Mindanao, which is the southern part of the Philippines. So we identified the center and the diocese who will handle that hub. One in Visayas, which is a critical region in the Philippines. That's the entry point of typhoons. And we have also in Luzon. We are organizing 2 hubs in Luzon. This is another attempt to help each diocese in coming up of their plans in strengthening their response to the climate change. And then we have this Rights of Nature campaign. Now we have the bill in our Congress, Rights of Nature, and we are pushing that this Rights of Nature will become a law. And we are following up with our political leaders. Hopefully, no, this will become a law and will really help us a lot. So recently we had this rally and big forum to support one diocese in Mindanao opposing the coal mining in their area. So these are in the specific initiatives that we do. And then we had several seminars or webinars on national divestment. We conducted dialogue with the banks, and then with the dioceses that have investments in these banks to put some pressures to them, to reinvest the funds to renewable energy. Now this is the process that we are doing in organizing eco-desks or ministries in each diocese. So each diocese will form a diocesan team or group. They have to capacitate the people in the diocese. So we have this formation and education program as one of the components of our National Laudato Si program. And then we help them organize their structures, their programs. We set up their strategies. We formulate their plans. And then we identify partners, local partners, for them to be helped, to be assisted. And we have these monitoring and learning reflection sessions. This model is now being put in a module in our Caritas Academy. We call it Ecology Ministry 101. This is a 2-week course, 2 sessions in a week for our people. And there are 101 students coming from different dioceses, priests, religious, and lay people joining this class. So hopefully after the class, they are now prepared to strengthen and even start their eco-desk and ministries in each diocese. Now our really the roadmap really is for sustainability and resiliency. We want to our social action network, which is 85 of them, will be resilient. That's why in each diocese, having these eco desks, we try to mainstream the program. Now we need to strengthen the capacity of the local people in the diocese to respond. And then we develop the roadmap on these priority actions of resiliency to understand more. That's why education is important in the disaster risk, strengthening the governance, and then we invest our resources in risk reduction and especially preparedness. So mainstreaming of this is now ongoing. We mainstream the DRR, or the disaster risk reduction, in every diocesan social action, the importance of investing resources, and then the importance also of having a clear planning and strategy for every diocese. And of course, we focus on this kind of programs. We are not only limited to emergency response, we engage in recovery, reconstruction, and then we prepare for the future disasters. And now we started our food security program as part of the roadmap for sustainability for our people. And lastly, we in building our sustainability and resiliency, we need to have a good partnership, coordination, mechanisms, partnership mechanism, because we cannot do it alone. We need everybody to get involved because this is everybody's business. So this is it, that hopefully our initiatives can help in responding to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Thank you very much for this opportunity and sharing with you.
Thank you very much, Father Tony, for sharing with us the roadmap for sustainability and resiliences, and the initiatives that you have taken on promoting Laudato Si national plan, which is very, very attractive, which is very, very useful for other national Caritas members, the Laudato Si plan, the way that you are implementing, and the eco-convergence plan of yours, the eco-convergence plan of the church and the civil society organizations, another model, the localization model that you have shared, and the advocacy effort against mining by Caritas Philippines. It is happening for many years, and we are happy that you are doing it as the situation is worse with regard to mining in Philippines. Thank you very much, Father Tony, for your excellent insight on the localization situation of Philippines. Now so all the presentations are over. Now we have to do the open discussion and sharing question and answer, which will be moderated by Mr. Ari Nugroho, who is the program officer for Caritas Asia. He has been with Caritas Asia for the last 4 years. Before joining Caritas Asia, he was the person in charge of the programs in Caritas Indonesia, which is also called Carina Indonesia. So the floor is yours, Sri Ari.
Thank you, Dr. Aridas, and also thank you for the great presentations from the speakers before. As mentioned, now we are opening the floor for comments or clarifications or even questions to the speakers. When you address your comments, please also mention your name and your organizations. And since we only have limited time for this, please make your point brief. I'm also seeing different points addressed in the chat box, and thank you for that.
Mr. Harry, this is Father Peter.
Yes.
Yeah, Father Peter Ashurwat from BDSS, Belgaum Diocese and Social Service Society, Karnataka.
Yes, please, Father.
I'm very happy to attend this webinar on a humanitarian support on the mitigation impact of climate change. One my just suggestion, or maybe for a future, Miss Clara, who spoke very beautifully about the climate change with all the facts and figures, which we can take as a data and we can present in front of the government, where they can take initiation and do something before fully destruction takes place. That's what my concern.
Thank you, Father.
Yeah.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Father Victor Hari. I'm from Kerala VSS, Vijayaram Social Service Society. My question is to mention about the presentation of Ms. Clara. about the Kerala situation of cyclones, the recently cyclones. The climate change, which dramatically changed our climate, especially in India. Recently, we have a lot of cyclones. It's because of the earth warming in different parts of the earth. What about to change our climate by planting a lot of greeneries in different areas? Can we reduce the cyclones or any other climate disorders by making us equalize the greenery in different parts of the world?
Thank you, Father. Claire, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Father, for in terms of being cyclone resilient, we're talking here really about adaptation only at this stage for the people, because mitigation will take time and the impacts that are already happening will continue. We just don't want them to get worse. The importance of mangroves is very important for coastal areas. That's indisputable. So replanting of mangroves. But the thing is that if they've been already removed, then it will take years for them to grow. The other adaptation methods are, the one about accommodation, being able to, live with sea level rise. The other thing about, sea walls, dikes, and so on. These are the adaptation measures. Some of them can be carried out by communities, but some are too big and they need governmental support. So the good news is that there is some action the communities can take, but I will also really look at, building up your water supplies and food, going back to ecological farming, planting, and so on, because cyclones, in the time of cyclones and post-cyclone, you'll have water and food shortages, all right? You don't have sort of emergency centers and places for people to relocate. When we talk about these sort of measures, they are already at the very late stage where we feel that we can't avoid the cyclone. We just have to learn to do our best to reduce the impacts. But if you're speaking about, preventing them, that will be difficult in the years to come. We just don't want them to get worse. So for instance, if you get, 10 cyclones a year hitting this part of the coast, you don't want it to increase to 20 or 30. But yes, planting, Father, it's important, but plant local varieties, plant the right kind of trees, plant the right kind of vegetation, build up your water and food security, and build up community resilience. Get the people to basically train them in resilience, get them to assess it, get them to take their own actions, because one kind of disaster, you prepare for one, but then you don't prepare for another. And sometimes there are multiple disasters. So building resilience as a whole has to be the way forward. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I saw Dr. Alo's hand raised just now.
Thank you, Ari. I was going to compliment what Clara has just said, that in Bangladesh, we have the experience of creating or building a green wall in front of the mangrove forests. Father Paul has mentioned the Sundarbans. So mangrove forest. So there was in the coastal area, a long green wall with the local varieties. So the impact of that green wall was that less damages, destruction, and also death. So I think this can minimize and reduce a lot of kind of properties as well as lives and livelihood. So it is important that NGOs and also government together, and also the participation of the community, we build a kind of a green wall along the coastal area. That's a kind of a proven answer in Bangladesh in some part of coastal area. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alo. I saw another 2 hands raised. Okay, go ahead. Mr. Kumar, Mr. Adichan Kumar.
Yes.
Yes.
Very good afternoon, everyone. It is a great pleasure that Professor Vinod Menon sir sounded here that on this World Humanitarian Day, all the stakeholders across the nation, NGOs and NGOs, governments of state and central should join to find a solution. To follow-up mechanism, we, Disaster Management and Rehabilitation Trust, Kanyakumari District, Tamil Nadu, we request this August gathering to institutionalize the CBDRM, community-based disaster risk management program, which is a proven one. We use them for preparedness as well as at the post-disaster phase. Once we globally institutionalize this, we can save the community at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. I saw people mention in the chat box that they cannot hear anything. I'm not sure what's happening because it's okay from my side. Because I'm sharing the screen. I'm sorry, I'm recording and also sharing the screen previously, so I could not see anything happening from my console. But I hope that everyone is hearing this clearly. Thank you again. Is there any more comments or any speakers that would like to respond to Mr. Kumar just now?
Yeah, hello.
Yes, Father George.
Yeah, this is Father George Joseph from Bhagalpur Social Service Society, Bihar, India. So thank you one and all for this arranging this webinar, especially for this Caritas India and Caritas Asia. So my request and a question, and I'm posing a challenge in front of each one of us, that as the outcome of this webinar, can we make a decision that together, as the outcome of Caritas Asia, can we do something practical as together? Because at present we are doing independently, separately, as part of our each country's Caritas support, we are doing separate ventures. So can we do together one activity, a program? So it will enrich our understanding about the climate change, and like Pope Francis, what he has messaged in Laudato Si, that as a common home for each one of us. So that kind of concept will, that idea will become more concrete in each one of us. Can we make a concrete decision that we will go ahead to any one program all together as the outcome of, as the product of Caritas Asia? So at the next year, when we go for this such a webinar, that will be an outcome, as the, like, we can celebrate the anniversary of this decision, and it will be very helpful for the people in need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father George. I think I can respond to that quickly. Currently, Caritas Asia is in the process of developing its new strategic plan. And thank you for the suggestion, Father George. And we will put that into our thinking when we are developing the new strategic plan. And in fact, climate change, disaster risk reduction, as well as the sustainable agriculture and other programs already a part of Caritas Asia strategic priorities for this year. And we'll make sure that it is also a part in the new strategic plan. But again, this plan is that we have in Caritas Asia is quite general for us, and we would like to also give freedom and opportunity, different opportunities for Caritas members in Asia to translate that into the actual action in their country, with their networks or with their diocese. Again, this is very well noted, Father George, and we'll make sure that it is part of the plan in the future. Any more comments or points?
Professor Menon has raised one thing in the chat box.
Let me check. Yes, thank you, Professor Menon. He mentioned about Lada Tosi in the Philippines. Yes, yes. Thank you. It's an example. Yeah. Is there any more comments from or clarifications perhaps? If not, then actually I'd like to ask our speakers, Ms. Claire, Professor Menon, and Father Tony, just to say, is there any message or any last message for us in the webinar? After hearing the presentations, also questions and comments from the participants, that you'd like to emphasize, perhaps something that you mentioned before, but you also want to say it again, just for us to take into account in the next step. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ari, for
yes
facilitating this question and answer session. I think a few years ago, almost a decade ago, there was a discussion where the developed countries agreed to invest about $100 billion with a B every year for strengthening resilience building of communities. So I think this has not really happened. So if we could actually discuss with multilateral and bilateral donors, and also with intergovernmental regional platforms in Asia Pacific and also in other countries where Caritas International is working, if we could actually look at what Suresh Kumar mentioned, community-based disaster risk management and also community resilience building, and after understanding the risk and vulnerability of communities which are exposed to natural disasters, climate change induced hydrometeorological disasters and extreme events, I think it would be very useful. So Caritas Asia, Caritas India, and Caritas International could take this forward. And in 2021, it was mentioned that 235 million people would need humanitarian assistance. And this number has gone up also because of COVID-19. So we need resilience building in large number of countries, 220 countries affected by COVID-19. And so with climate change, this has become all the more important. So with the Paris Agreement, Sendai framework of disaster risk reduction, and also sustainable development goals, and the new urban agenda, we have a bigger role and a bigger challenge. So I request, Caritas Internationalists and Caritas Asia to take the initiative. As Claire mentioned, the Caritas platform, which is looking at, some of these issues, could actually also take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Menon. And I think, again, you said about resilience building, and it relates very well with your previous presentation about working with communities as a new form of humanitarian work. We are working with all levels in the community to ensure their resilience. Thank you, Professor Vinod. Again, going back to the message, I also see a couple of points raised by our participants there in the chat box. Thank you for that. Can I invite Ms. Claire, just to respond to my previous question? Is there any message that you'd like to address here as the participants in this webinar?
Okay, thanks so much, Ari. What I gave you was an overview of the climate situation, but I can see the interest here, especially with Caritas. You work, really on the ground. And on the ground, especially in the global south, the real challenge is resilience. That's why I say the pathway forward, has to be resilience and justice. You can't have justice. You can't have justice without resilience, right? You can't have resilience without justice. So I think a good way forward would be to really build capacity in what resilience entails. A lot of in the international arena, people speak about mitigation and adaptation. These are very Western notions and concepts. It came from the UNFCCC negotiations and so on. And a lot of people think that they are, adaptation and resilience are interchangeable. They are not, because as Father Tony gave the definition of resilience itself, is the ability to withstand shocks and the ability to recover quickly after a shock, and also the ability to thrive in spite of external pressures, right? Whether it's spiritual resilience, whether it's physical resilience, whether it's an ecosystem resilience or community resilience, it's the same thing. And I think it's a pity that, we think that it's only disaster risk management, because then we've sort of given up. We're just saying, okay, just get them to survive, right? We only think of before, during, and after disasters. And that's not really the quality of life that we want. It is practical, yes, to deal with disasters, but at the same time, there are many communities that we can't reach out to because there's just not enough of us, and it's too widespread. All right, for every village that you save or you reach out to, there are 100,000 more that we can't. And so the real, asset that we have to build here is the community itself, the communities that will help to train one another, the communities that will support one another. We've seen evidence of this with COVID. All right. While urban cities are saying they don't have enough food, we're finding different parts of the world, rural people are giving away food, all right, taking it to cities in South America, in different parts of Asia and so on. These are the people that invested in what is called agroecology or ecological agriculture. Dr. Hari will know well about this, right? And also urban people being able to grow their own food. Urban people taking ownership, doing advocacy for what their rights are. I think it's a time for people to rise up. And we need to remember that compassion is also being strong. Yeah, it's not just giving to people, it is empowering them to stand up for themselves and to be able to grow. What they need are skills. They need linkages. They need those sort of, that sort of help, those sort of avenues, right? And we cannot forget always about advocacy, the importance of advocacy. The COP26 is coming up, all right? Caritas can actually make a statement, should make a statement, and call for, equitable ways forward, and stop, going back on your promises. Step up, because if the message of climate change is you stand together or you will die together, it does not care whether you're rich, you're poor, and so on. It's a pity, because it is really unfair to the poorer countries. But that's a fact we have to live with. And so now it is empowering each and every person to realize that they have the power to make the change. And it has to happen in this decade. If you look at the climate science, we have a very small window. Once we pass this, 2 degrees is assured, and then 3, and so on and so forth, right? So we're trying to avoid that worst case scenario. It's not a good scenario now already. We actually really are too late. But what is to come, or what can come, will be far worse, and that will be on our conscience. That will be on each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. And it's a strong message, actually, but it's also homework for us. And also thank you for bringing that up, for the upcoming COP26, because as mentioned in the invitation and also in the TOR of this webinar, that we are going to use parts of this webinar to develop our contribution to Caritas International's statement to the COP26. And we will include all your suggestions, all your comments, and also concern in this message. Also, going back to your message, Claire, again, rebuild resilience, community, and I think that's the strongest part of Caritas that we are also working on the ground. And I'd like to offer the floor to Father Tony, because Father Tony, you mentioned a lot about in your presentation about resilience. Anything from your end, Father? A brief message for all of us. I mean, it's okay if you already give everything during your presentation, but again, if, in case something that you'd like to add for your presentation or for your message.
Okay, thank you. Our vision in Caritas Philippines is empowered and resilient communities, and we feel that that is really the direction. And we have to invest all our resources for that empowerment and resiliency of the communities, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are going to face all these problems of climate change. And then the one point is really building structures in the dioceses. I think this is very strategic, because communities cannot be empowered and resilient if we don't have structures to help them to have that roadmap, to have that assistance, for empowerment and resiliency. That's why the need of mainstreaming of the program in the whole structure of the diocese, and even in the national level, in the conference level, we try our best to get involved all the Episcopal commissions, because there is a need for a structural backup. No, that's why the National Laudato Si program, which is the program of the Episcopal Conference, is the one that will really facilitate that empowerment and resiliency of the communities. So I feel this is very important point, to have a mobilization in the national and in the diocesan level in order to facilitate the empowerment and resiliency programs in the communities. So that's the point that I learned. I'm new to Caritas Philippines, is only in 2020, but as I facilitated the coming up of the programs of the National Laudato Si, I feel that there is really the importance of involving the conference. And especially when we go down to the local diocese, we need the involvement of the bishop and all the programs. So mainstreaming that resiliency program is very important. So that's our learning and from our initiative, and hopefully we will be learning more along the way as we face different challenges of the climate change.
Thank you, Father. So one key point from your from message is involvement of all elements in the all implementations, not only communities but also structural. That's a good message. Thank you, Father Tony. And before we close this open discussion and sharing session, I'd just like to say thank you for those who have contributed through the chat box. I think in addition to all this discussion on climate change and how we build community resilience, one participant mentioned about contribution from the smallest thing that we can do from our surroundings, from our home, from our family. That is also a good contribution. Thank you again for speakers, for participants who already give your insights and comments and inputs for this webinar. And we have come to almost to the end of this webinar. But before we close, before I give this floor to Mr. Ghanshyam Jetwa for the conclusion and vote of thanks, I'd like to invite everyone, if you are, if you are willing to turn on your camera so that we can see all your beautiful and handsome faces, because we would like to have a group picture. This is a huge number of participants. It's the first time for us, for me. So we have 4 pages. I don't know which one or how we are going to do this, but I have 4 pages on my screen. So I will just take a quick shot, and then I will let you know if we have completed. So I will take the picture of the first page. Wow, this is a huge group. Hold on. Okay. Your very best smile. Thank you again. This is page 3. Again, we apologize for the technical difficulties that we only allow 100 people to join for this. This is exciting. Hold on. The last page, 4 page. Okay. So thank you again for your participation and then for your insights. I'd like to give this floor to Mr. Gansan Jatwa, from the head of program of Caritas India, for the conclusion and vote of thanks. Mr. Jatwa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Ari. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you very much. All the eminent speakers and participants, on behalf of Caritas India, I would like to express our gratitude here. I think this has been a really great event, spreading great awareness on the climate change and the actions that we need to take forward. So that's really great. First of all, thanks to Almighty God for bringing us together on this wonderful day and making this event really a great success in terms of reflecting and finding the way forward. Thank you, Dr. Benedict D. Rosario, President of Caritas Asia, for your welcome address and speaking on the recent report of IPCC, which is actually quite shocking. The flood situation in many parts of the world and drought and forest fire in many other parts of the world due to climate change. And thanks to Father Dr. Paul for your speech that actually highlighted addressing those needs by focusing on 4 P's, which are people, planet, peace, and prosperity. I think that's quite inspiring. Father, you expressed concern on the entitlements of land for the poor people, the need to focus on water conservation measures, and the need to promote courageous innovation. So thank you, Father, for that. Thank you, Ms. Claire Westwood, for opening our eyes on the increase of global temperature and pollution, which is quite shocking, in fact. You said warming depends on our choices, and I think that's a very powerful statement that yes, it depends on our choices that we make on a day-to-day basis. Today, everyone is at risk of climate change, very much, everywhere in the world. Thank you, Professor Vinod Menon, for sharing the contribution of humanitarian practitioners in emergency situations and difficult times. And many times, the humanitarian professionals, workers, and practitioners, they have lost their lives in serving the people and fighting the climate change. So that's the service that they have rendered. You are also right, Professor Menon, in saying that the situation of malnutrition, loss of food security, epidemic, pandemic, disasters like flood, droughts, landslide, and groundwater depletion, etc., are on the rise. And we have to be part of the solutions, as you rightly expressed. Thank you very much, Father Antonio Labias, for sharing the roadmap for sustainability and resilience and the initiatives taken by the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Philippines on promoting Laudato Si National Plan. I think that's really quite inspiring and great. You also mentioned about the eco-convergence of church and the CSOs, civil society organizations. That's, I think, a very good message, Father. Thank you, Mr. Ari, definitely for facilitating the open discussion, which has enriched our joint understanding on the way forward. And thank you, Dr. Haridas and the Caritas India team for your wonderful endeavors in organizing this great event. Thanks to all the participants for your participation, including your active participation through chat box. So thank you so much. Thank you again, everyone, for your participation in your contribution in this webinar and taking and defining the way forward. Thank you very much, and over.
Thank you, Ghanshyamji, for concluding the sessions and the vote of thanks. And then their session went on very well, many appreciations, and you can see in the chat box, a lot of appreciations. And there is also a request for the follow-up of the questions. It was really good. Thank you very much for the participation, as well as I would like to appreciate the speakers, Claire, Professor Menon, and Father Tony for your active involvement and wonderful talk in this webinar. Thank you, Airi and team Anjan, Pradeepta, Pooja, and Simon, Patrick, and all for joining in organizing it in this important webinar. Thank you all. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay safe, everyone. And
yeah,
we will share this recording in Baobab, and also we'll share the link to you all so that you can review in the future about this discussion, and maybe you would like to take some of the points from this webinar for your program or your project, or for developing your own ideas in the future. And I think in the celebration of this World Humanitarian Day, we also invite the Caritas members in Asia to share their works on climate change adaptation or working on the climate emergency in social media. And I think we can keep this going up to October this year, because there will be International Day for DRR in October. So I think it's good that we still keep this discussion continue until October. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ari. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Everyone, take care.